And we are back on the 0 Hour, broadcasting live from the floor of the Democratic, well, not from the floor, from the exoskeleton of the Democratic National Convention here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We are on Talk Radio Row, which actually kind of circles the floor of the convention itself, and we are here with a good friend of ours, good friend of the if I may say so, good friend of the program. Eric Kingson is co-founder of Social Security Works. He is also professor of sociology at Syracuse University, and he has just completed a very impressive run for Congress in the Democratic primary in New York's, which district was
24th Congressional District.
24th Congressional District, Syracuse area, not far from my hometown of Utica, where he unfortunately did not place first, but very respectable showing as a Bernie Sanders Democrat. And he is here. You are here also. First of all, Eric, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Always good to be here, Richard.
Always good to have you. Secondly, you are also here as a Bernie Sanders delegate, right?
Well, I was appointed to the National Platform Committee, so I was down in Orlando during the platform discussions.
Oh, okay. So you're here as a member of the Platform Committee as well. So you were, you have a sort of dual credentials for that. You're now a former Bernie Sanders candidate,
yes.
congressional candidate, and as a professor of sociology and co-founder of Social Security Works, you know a lot about retirement programs and intergenerational relationships and those types of things. So what was your primary contribution to the Platform Committee, if I may ask? Or your area of involvement?
Well, certainly around Social Security. We had even going into the Platform Committee, we had a strong Social Security statement. There were some things that needed to be improved, and they were improved. We didn't get everything, but we got a lot on that. On the platform generally, I was very supportive, not surprisingly, of Bernie's positions on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, on Medicare for All, on environmental issues. Again, we did get many important things, but we didn't get everything. But I left there. Actually, I left there. When I started reading the platform, I thought it was a pretty darn good start. And we left, and it got better.
You know, one of the things that we've talked about this before, I think, Eric. But one of the things that amazes me is when you and I first met and talked about the subject of Social Security, maybe 6 years ago, I would guess. 5-6 years ago, we were struggling to make sure that the Democratic Party and the Democratic president, and then candidate for re-election, did not sign on to a grand bargain to cut Social Security. Now it is the accepted position of the Democratic Party, not only that it should not be cut or privatized, but that it should be expanded.
It's a remarkable shift, and it's a result of the work of many organizations, certainly Social Security Works and the National Coalition, which has representation from the country's major unions, major aging groups like the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, the Alliance for Retired Americans, an extraordinary ally, the women's organizations, veterans, disability. A lot of organizations worked hard to stop cuts and to get the message out that this system works.
Yeah.
And the American public is real clear on it. They know it works. We then pivoted, as you know, Richard, to the idea that not only does the system work and should it not be cut, but we had to get a message out that it was time to expand protections, especially for people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are heading into a very difficult retirement.
Yeah, and this is the part that amazes me, when the cynics try to create a sense of intergenerational conflict around this by telling younger people that they're going to get the short end of the stick. Their proposals are always ones that wind up hurting younger people most of all.
Absolutely.
So I love the fact that, and you are the one who taught me, I think, the most about the fabric of generations and how to think about that and how to, make sure that we work together on this issue and reinforce one another across the generations. And of course, this was pivoting for a second to politics. This was, I think, one of the key issues in your congressional campaign.
It was a key
right?
issue, and it was also the experience of working with Social Security Works and helping to co-found it and seeing what we had done working with many other organizations to shift the agenda that led me to want to spend some time running for political office.
Well, how is that? I mean, now you and I talked about it while you were running, but looking back on it, what's the through line that you see between working with Social Security Works, which was advocacy, for lack of a better word, and then wanting to run for office?
Well, I think in the best sense, members of Congress should be advocates. They should play a role in building community organizations. There's nothing special about a member of Congress other than the title, but the title is useful, and it ought to be used not to advance the interests of the 1%, to use the language of today, but to build at a community base, support the community groups that are working on issues of whether it's dealing with the criminal justice system, dealing with the threat of drugs, dealing with the lack of support for mental health services, dealing with the neighborhoods, jobs, and part of a job of a member of Congress should be to lay the foundation, even if you don't get it in 2 years or 4 years, but to build on that foundation. It's unacceptable that Americans don't have health insurance, that we have young people in schools who are coming out without jobs, high schools coming out without jobs, or that students coming out of college are burdened down with $100,000 in debt.
Right.
This isn't the country we want. So I see a member of Congress, not just, obviously they do support rules, they support laws, and they work on legislation, but I think the more important role in some ways is playing a role in shifting the discussion, and that's the link to Social Security Works. We shifted the discussion, working with many organizations, and I wanted to take that, and still in different ways, into a different arena. In terms of the issue of Social Security, it was very critical in the election, absolutely.
You know, it strikes me, it's one of those, I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate it. Again, we're talking with Eric Kingson, co-founder of Social Security Works, professor of sociology at Syracuse University, and congressional candidate, former congressional candidate. To me also it goes back to the idea of the citizen politician, the idea of the person who goes into politics because they represent a set of values that is contiguous with the values of the people in their district or the people at large, rather than because they have chosen the job title politician.
Being a politician.
Right?
No, being a politician should be an honorable calling.
Right.
Just as being a teacher, a minister or rabbi, you name it, an imam, many other important areas, nursing, but there's no reason why we don't look at it as an opportunity to do some good things for people we live with in the community. So I see it in those terms, as I know you do too, Richard. I also think that we have a very cynical populace today. Our young people have been weaned on the pablum of government is incompetent and full of people who aren't willing to do things. And we're seeing that come home to roost in the Republican Party having lost their party, in a sense, and handed it over to a neo-fascist, Mr. Trump.
Right.
And so we have a lot of building to do. One of the things I had hoped to do as a member, and I'm going to try to do in some other ways, I want to spend some time in high schools just talking with kids about the importance of being involved. Spend time, there are community groups out there. One of the best parts of running was seeing where democracy does work today at the local level. It's not perfect, it can be ugly, but there are people out there on weekends and on Friday nights, on weekday nights. They're out there trying to improve their schools,
right.
Try to deal with their neighborhoods. So it's an education. When I go to a meeting, and it's not that I didn't know the numbers. I went to one meeting of Syracuse United Neighbors in a low-income African-American community in Syracuse, and the police captain, a woman, was there to give the monthly report. She said, we have a good monthly report. In the last month, we've only had 6 reports of gunfire and only 1 person hit by gunfire. That obviously it's not tolerable for my children.
Right.
It's not tolerable for anyone's children or grandma or person. So I think it's important to bring people together in understanding that we in fact are part of a larger community and we can't afford to be separate, and if we are, then we get folks like Trump who likes to play us against them, build on fear, and we'll have a very different nation.
the scariest moment for me during there were multiple scary ones during the Republican National Convention, was the moment when Trump said, I forget what he said he was going to do, and the audience started chanting, "Yes, you will." Yes, that to me is totalitarianism. We went from somehow, yes, we can, to yes, you will. We want a powerful leader to take care of it for us. But, on the flip side of it, and I think your campaign was part of this, we had this Bernie Sanders campaign, all the young people who came out and felt, yes, we can be a part of this political process. We do want to get engaged. I think some of them got engaged in your campaign as well. I think you
Very
got
much so.
33% of the vote. Was that the final number? And so in a three-way race, that's pretty darn good
and also
for
in a race where the
politician.
Democratic Party, the establishment, was doing its best to undermine my candidacy from day one.
Right.
The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. So I feel very good about that.
And you ran very clearly as a Bernie Sanders Democrat, as a candidate of change. So what do you think about those people who got involved in your campaign and maybe were working?
They're wonderful. And that to me, it's also what I feel about as a teacher, a professor. I love finding young people who want to make change and who are engaged. I've said this so many times, and when Bernie came up to do a rally for me, I said this to the folks we had there. Susan B. Anthony started the suffrage movement. Not just her, but especially her. She wasn't alive when the 19th Amendment that gave the vote was passed.
Right.
But she was part of that history. And we're all a part of a stream of history, and we have to understand that, or else cynicism takes over. And for our young people, and I'm saying this, some middle-aged and older people too, if you gotta fight, work hard, keep focused on the values and what you want to accomplish, but you can't get cynical and walk away. Or you can get cynical, but you can't walk away. And if you want to be cynical, then get even, don't get mad.
Right, winning is the best.
But winning, winning isn't as important. It's important, and I would have liked to have won, but I also think the way we did it was good, and I had some wonderful people involved where I think a lot of them, or some of them, are going to be involved in politics in Syracuse, which is great. One of them is going off to be a field. My co-campaign manager is going to work for Zephyr Teach Out.
Oh, great! Okay.
Just got a job yesterday or the day before with her. Which I was delighted. I'm very supportive of Zephyr. And you watch people go forward, and that's, I think, where you and I are in that kind of avuncular mentoring mode. Right. To some extent, we're still alive and active and have a hell of a lot to do.
Right.
But we also have a job of engaging the next groups of people who are going to carry a torch. And that doesn't mean we stop at age 70, 80, 90, whatever. But a lot of our job is bringing people forward. So that was fun. That was a fun part.
I'm sure. And, it gets to the point that winning is not what people always say it is. Right? In other words, a campaign can win because you get your guy or gal in to do exactly what the person before them did, or winning can be that you've changed hundreds, perhaps thousands, or in Bernie's case, perhaps millions of young lives so that they'll think about it differently. Last question for you, Eric Kingson. So how do we keep people from becoming cynical? How do we keep young people or others, older people who got involved?
I think Bernie
excited.
Right now is talking about engaging people at all levels in electoral politics. I think that's important. I also think it's important to engage people, all levels, not just young, in community-based change organization. It's not all about electoral politics. It's about moving issues. It's about bringing power or facilitating power. There's a lot of strength in our communities, even our poorest communities, and most communities with the highest socio-demographic kinds of problems we would talk about. But there's a lot of strength in those communities. We build on it. We have an obligation. And so I think part of it is just being there, also bearing witness with them. We also have to be online with them.
Absolutely.
And they really like that. That's what they liked about Bernie. He's authentic.
Right.
He stands, you know what he says he means, and young people are, and not just young people, you and I, we actually believe that's how people ought to conduct their lives in every way.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, Eric Kingson,
Thank you, sir.
candidate for Congress
Always
and
good.
co-founder of Social Security, always a pleasure.
Thanks.